Hello, Professor B back. Have you ever had one of those days when you just make mistake after mistake, and sometimes it's the same one over and over again? Well, in this episode, we're going to take a look at some grammatical mistakes that are common to most people and how we fix them. There are, I believe, 7 of them, so let's dive in and see what we can find.
All right, let's take a look at our top grammar mistakes. In this short presentation, I will walk us through 7 of the most common grammar mistakes that I have seen used and others have as well. There's a lot of writing to support how we fix these things. Okay, so let's look at number 1. Number 1 is the comma splice, and you can see the definition there. A comma splice is when you splat 2 sentences together and only join them with a comma. Okay? Therefore, called a comma splice. It's a special type of run-on sentence. I have a couple examples. The first one, the machine kept running, comma, we pulled the plug. The second one, we moved the telescope just a little to the left, comma, the new nova immediately came into view. You know from our previous work that you can see 4 complete independent clauses here. The machine kept running, we pulled the plug, we moved the telescope just a little to the left, and the new nova came immediately into view. Each one has a subject and a verb and occasionally a direct object. So they are independent clauses, they stand alone. Our problem is when we make those compound sentences, what is required when we join them together? Remember, it's a comma plus a coordinating conjunction, or a semicolon. So let's look at how we might fix this. Our first option is to do just that. Change it to a comma with a coordinating conjunction. Remember our fanboys. So for the first one, the machine kept running, so we pulled the plug. And we moved the telescope a little to the left, comma, and the new nova came immediately into view. All right, make sense? That's an easy way to fix it. Always look through your writing as you're going through and make sure that you don't add comma splices. You can, for the second way, replace the comma with a semicolon. The machine kept running, semicolon, we pulled the plug. Likewise, semicolon instead of the comma on the second one. You can also take out the comma, replace it with a period, and create 2 grammatically correct sentences. The machine kept running, period. Uppercase, we pulled the plug. Same for the bottom one. Okay, this is also grammatically correct. You could change it up a little bit and add a subordinating conjunction to make what kind of sentence? That's correct, a complex one. Since the machine kept running, we pulled the plug. Because we moved the telescope, da-da-da-da-da. Okay, makes sense? Several ways to fix these things. Comma coordinating conjunction, semicolon, change them into 2 simple sentences, or insert a subordinating conjunction. Let's look at the second one, the run-on sentence. This happens when you place 2 or more complete independent clauses, air quotes, sentences, into one without any conjunctions or punctuation. You can see this from the 2 examples. The computer suddenly crashed and had a virus. The brain goes, wow, I'm getting a lot of information there. I think I see 2 sentences, but the punctuation isn't there to match it. The second longer example, the Orion Nebula lies about 1,500 light years from the sun. The nebula is a blister on the side of the Orion molecular cloud that is closest to us. You almost have to have a gigantic breath to get all the way through that because there's nothing to make us pause. How can we fix these things? The strategies are the same as they were for our comma splice because a comma splice is a special type of run-on sentence. In this case, we added a subordinating conjunction. You see that? We made it a complex sentence. Here we used our semicolon trick. Right. Moving on to another type of grammatical mistake, the fragment. In this case, it doesn't express a complete thought, right? Remember back to our other talks we've had so far. These can be phrases, they can be dependent clauses that are left hanging on their own. They can be a random set of words that just don't make sense. So let's see how we fix them. In the first case, we have a subject and a verb, but that subordinating conjunction at the beginning makes it so it's not a complete thought. Your brain is wondering, well, what happened because the new motherboard was not working? And at the bottom, the report missing some important data, it doesn't contain a verb. Missing important data is a phrase that modifies report, so there is no actual verb there. How do we fix it? Evaluate what you have and what you need. In our first one, we can remove that subordinating conjunction and say the new motherboard was not working, and it is fixed. We took out that subordinating conjunction, and then we have a complete independent clause. Because the new motherboard was not working, comma, finish the thought. We returned it to the manufacturer. We added an independent clause, creating a complex sentence. All right, the report missing important data. We can add a verb. The report was missing important data. In this case, it's one of our to-be verbs. The report, comma, missing important data, comma, was corrected quickly. We converted it to a parenthetical phrase and added a verb. Our next type of grammatical mistake is a dangling or misplaced modifier. This is what happens when you place phrases somewhere where it doesn't actually modify the subject, okay? So in our first example, while eating lunch, the acid boiled over and destroyed the lab. The second one, after driving to Chicago, our faithful cat was a welcome sight. Our brain understands what we mean when we read that, but grammatically it doesn't make sense. Can the acid actually eat lunch? While eating lunch, the acid, okay, this modifies the acid. So in that case, grammatically, the acid is eating lunch. And in the second one, generally, cats do not drive. After driving to Chicago, modifies cat. Which cat? Our faithful cat. Hey, how do we fix this? Make sure that your introductory phrase modifies the true subject of the sentence. While we were eating lunch, that fixes the problem. We tell who is eating. The acid boiled over and destroyed the testing apparatus. And we can fix this one by saying, after driving to, we've gone to a different city now, Cleveland, we were glad to see our faithful cat. Now, both of these make grammatical sense, and any reader would be able to understand what we're talking about. Another type of odd disagreement is when our subject does not agree with our verbs. The windows we discovered after some investigation was the reason for the heat loss in the house, and either my DVD player or my stereo were blowing the fuse. Okay, what's the problem? Well, our verb must match our subject. In this case, this is added information, so our subject over here and our verb are separated, but they have to match. Windows is a plural noun, requires a plural verb. Windows must be were. Either my DVD or my stereo were. Okay, this is another rule we haven't talked about yet, but when you have a pair with an or, the last noun must match the verb here. So stereo is singular, must be a singular verb was. And here we talk about that. The verb will always agree with the noun that comes after or. The speeding cars or the reckless motorcycle was responsible for the accident. Either the falling branches or the high winds were responsible for the damage. So this makes sense. We're using the noun that comes after the or to match with our verb. Do that and you'll be successful. What happens with a collective noun? A group, a network, a crowd. that name a group as a whole, and they take a singular verb. So the group of writers was responsible for the accident. Was refers back to group. Of writers modifies group, so it has no bearing on what we're trying to do. Now, pronoun and antecedent disagreement. This can happen when you forget whether your subject was singular or plural when dealing with your antecedent pronouns. Anyone who thinks we is better than Sony PlayStation should have their head examined. What is the problem? Think about it. Like the scientists, we were sure the rocket was going to blast off, but it wasn't long before you knew it was a dud. And let's fix this. We must match singular to singular and plural to plural. Our problem here is our antecedent pronoun is anyone matching with their. This is singular, this is plural. We can fix it by saying anyone who thinks da-da-da-da-da should have his or her head examined. Or we can change the antecedent pronoun at the start to say people who think have their heads examined. People is plural, there is plural. Now it makes sense. Our second example, like the scientists, we were sure the rocket was going to blast off. Here are two ways to fix it. We can match we up with I, because you doesn't make much sense when we're doing we, and we to we is a better option. Now, faulty parallelism is when you jolt your readers with different forms when writing lists or other items in parallel form. An example, after the interview, we went out for dinner, had a few drinks, and a few jokes were told. Machinery that was broken and bad morale created serious problems for the company, which was already struggling to meet heavy payments and conforming to strict government regulations. Wow, that's a mouthful. Let's see how we might fix it. After the interview, we went out for dinner, had a few drinks, and I'm going to think it's going to be something like told a few jokes. Yes, that makes sense. Our parallel form is after the interview, we verb, phrase, verb, phrase, verb, phrase. Now my brain is in a pattern. Went, had, and told. Now, machinery that was broken, let's see how we might fix this one. Broken machinery and bad morale created serious problems for the company, which was already struggling to meet heavy payments and to conform to strict government regulations. Now we have the to verb here. To meet, to conform. These are infinitive forms. All right, we've looked at several ways to fix our 7 top grammatical problems. The slide deck is available for you to download. You can rewatch this video again and again if you need to, but roll this into your writing and your toolbox will be fuller and you will be better technical writers.
Hey, we're back. Well, that was interesting. Did you pick up any new information on how you might help your writing become better? Our goal, as always, is to become better, stronger, more accurate, more concise technical writers so we can be successful in our academic and professional careers moving forward. Hopefully this was helpful for you. This is Professor B signing out. Stay tuned for the next episodes.